I'm so sick of this product being out of stock, and I think it's my own fault. This is Groundeffected, and my name is in fact your dad. About 2 years ago, I made a couple of videos showing how I paint skin tones using this fairy flesh set, and ever since then, it's always been out of stock. And now I'm not trying to put 2 and 2 together, but when 2 and 2 equals 4, I'm starting to think I need a new set. Now don't get me wrong, a fairy flesh set is still an amazing set for painting skin tones, and to be fair, it paints a wide variety of skin tones, but in the majority of things that I paint, they look like this. And so I have devised my own recipe of model paints that can be replaced one by one instead of having to buy an entire set that is always out of stock. And now I know that many of you have the attention span of a flea, so I'm just going to show you these paints right now, and you can leave the video if you want. But just before you do that, click like and maybe subscribe and leave some words in the box of the thing. Before we go into the video, I'm going to show you how I use the paint on at least 3 of these models, but this is the results that I've gotten using this particular skin set instead of that one, and I'm pretty happy with what it looks like so far. So if you're interested in seeing how I got to at least these results, you can watch these in previous videos, and I'm going to show you mostly this today. Now, it wouldn't be a Groundeffected video if we didn't start off on a complete tangent, and actually this tangent's really going to help with painting the skin tones later on. A lot of this has to do with the pressure as well as how thick or thin your paint is. Now this I can't really help you with because you're going to have to figure this out yourself, but what you can see with the pressure is that the lower it is, the more speckly the paint is, and this is how I got the texture of the sand on this base. I just painted every single layer in a speckly fashion, and this makes it look like it is textured. Once I had made sure that I had the correct values that I kind of needed with the heights and the depths of the sand, I then overlaid it with some other contrast paints to try and make it look sort of like, I'm not happy, but you know what? It looks like sand in some kind of a place, and so I'm just going to leave it there. Let's get onto the skin tones, and of course, for all the skin tones that I usually do, I will start out with a black primer, and this is because I like the one from Citadel, and after that, I will use a white ink to give it of highlight, which is going to be zenithal, volumetric, whatever it is, but you're going to then give it a violet red, another highlight, which is also going to be volumetric or zenithal or whatever it is, and you're then going to take transparent red and spray that into the shadows. This steps has not changed. All of this is pretty much the same, and I've been using this with the fairy flesh set as well. Where it changes, however, is here using the medium flesh tone from Vallejo. I'm going to spray that over the entirety of the model. I'm going to be leaving some of that purple in the undertones. On this particular model, not that much though, but I'm going to show you that later on in the video. If you leave a little bit more purple, you can create a different effect. At this point, I'm now taking the basic skin tone and I'm spraying that into all the highlighted areas. This is not the final step, but I'm going to try and create some volume using that. In all the shadows and the bendy parts like the elbows, underneath the knees and things like that, I'm going to use Orcish Dermis, and once I'm satisfied, I'm going to take Skeleton Horde and I'm going to speckle that using the same technique that I used for the sand painting all around the skin. This is going to look like there is literally a fly poo being chucked all over this model. Don't worry though, because the next steps are going to be adding some basic skin tone back over again, because at this point it's going to start to highlight more and more. Whilst I'm painting these skin tones, in most cases I'm using probably close to a 50-50 mixture in my airbrush with water. I never use anything other than water. I also take a little bit of a white ink and I add that to the basic skin tone towards the end, and I will then spray on the highest of the highlight areas to create some contrast. I would just like to mention this video was not sponsored by anybody other than myself, and I felt like this was the best way to deliver this information without confusing it with anything. However, I am not a maniac, and so if you do like these models, then I'm going to leave a link for them in the description down below. In fact, I'm just going to leave a link for their Patreons. These are from CA3D Studios, and these are from East Sea Monster. Now, obviously, you should go and support these guys because they are artists, and without them, we can't have things to paint. But also, very more importantly, please go and check out my own Patreon where I deliver a couple more extra videos. For example, there is a complete video on painting this model all on its own. as well as I will be doing some extra videos for the painting of the skin tones of these models on my Patreon too. There will probably be more, but I'm very disorganized, and it comes when it comes. But your support is very much appreciated, so check out my Patreon for support of channel. Now, before we move on to the next way I use to paint skin tones using the same set, I'm going to start working on the rest of Chun-Li, and I'm going to start painting some of the details because this model is really simple to paint. Really, it's just skin tones with a tiny little bit of fabric and some hair, which was the ideal model to be using for this kind of video, which is exactly why I chose this, because I can't really do a naked model on YouTube, and also that's kind of weird. So this was the most amount of skin that I could possibly show in order to show you how I painted the skin tones, and so I'm going to just finish out the rest of the model because otherwise that is wasted footage, and I don't want to waste my footage. As you can tell, I used blue to paint the bikini top, and when I was done with that, I added some shadows to it with my airbrush, and I then painted the gold trimming on it. I also painted the black on her hair, and I masked up her arms using some cling film, and then I sprayed a little bit of a highlight on her hair. It was roughly around a couple hours after this that I realized that her hair shouldn't actually be black, and it's more of a brown, and I did change this later on, so don't be angry with me. Or do, I don't really care actually. I painted her eyebrows luckily in brown, which is pretty good because her hair needed to go brown. Imagine that. I didn't even have the foresight at this point. Never mind. For the next set of skin tone, I'm going to try a different way of doing this. This is going to be a little bit more simpler, and perhaps for those who are a little bit not so astute when it comes to volumetric highlighting. This one, I'm going to start out with Orcish Dermis as a solid color over a zenithal highlighted model, let's say. I'm then going to take the medium flesh tone, and I'm going to try to just zenithal this model with the medium flesh tone, and that is it. I'm not going to do anything fancy. It is just spraying from the top down. Already you can start to see how the volume is already showing itself without actually being too specific about it. Now I'm going to take basic skin tone, and I'm going to spray this again just from a zenithal, which is directly from the top, where the light would be coming from just above at a slight angle, and I'm just going to spray that all over the model. At this point, if you are a beginner, you could probably call this model done and start to paint the rest of the details, but I'm going to take it a little bit further. I'm going to add a little bit of white into the basic skin tones, and I'm going to add a lot more highlights on it. You could totally paint this model and it could be totally passable skin tones. This is the easy way, and I personally don't particularly like this way, but it is a way that you can do it, and you could call your model done and it would look great and fantastic, and everyone will go, wow, look, you can paint. I'm going to take it a little bit further though, and in order to do this, I'm going to give it a matte varnish because this will protect all the layers underneath. Not that they need it, because I'm about to take it all the way. This is Sunny Skin Tone. This is a different skin tone, and I'm going to add this over the top. This is just so that I can show you, you can introduce other skin tones from skin tone sets or from other brands into your mix, because this will help to add more color to the skin. A skin tone is not one color, it is multitudes of colors, and it is for this reason that the more colors you use, the more realistic your skin tones is going to look. I then came back in to the rest of this using the Orcish Dermis, and I actually put this in places that were very important. Again, like I said, this goes into all the undersides of things, armpits, underneath your knees, at the backs of your knees, underneath your friggin' stomach muscles, all underneath of everything. And while those skin tones dry, I'm going to start to complete the rest of Chun-Li while we wait for it. And the way I'm going to do that is by painting obviously her eyes, because it would look weird if you didn't paint the eyes. Also, now that it is dry, I'm going to use some greens to start painting the suit. And I'm going to do this in exactly the same way I did Chun-Li's. I'm going to paint a base layer first, and I'm going to use a blue in the shadows, because blue will put a shadow on green, and also it won't look weird on skin. I know that sounds crazy, but just trust me, if there's a bit of overspray, it's not the absolute end of the world. Now, you may have noticed that I sprayed a little bit of a grayish color into her eyes. This is to simulate some sort of eyeshadow, and I used literally fluorescent pink, watered down very thin, onto her cheeks to create some form of a blush. I don't know anything about makeup, but I think that's how it's done. I'm not really sure, but I paint the lips with Magos purple so they look a little bit more like lips. I then paint black on all the eyelashes, and I paint the whites of the eyes with didnt. Yes, you can now start to drink because I'm starting to use didnt. But don't get too excited, because I'm going to stop using that color to paint the rest of the eyes, and I'm going to use a dark blue followed by a light blue, and then I'm going to paint a black for the pupil with a lovely little white highlight and move on. Now, I know that someone somewhere is going to have a problem with the fact that I mentioned a Patreon or even supporting a creator on the internet. So this is why in this video, not only have I showed you 2 different ways of using this skin set, I'm about to show you a 3rd with additional features. So if you cannot understand how to paint the skins after watching this, then definitely the Patreon is something for you. Perhaps, I'm not really sure, but let's get back into the video. For this model, I'm going to use, again, a black primer, and I'm going to volumetrically highlight this with white ink. You can see that I'm not just spraying it directly from the top, but I'm picking volume areas so that it is highlighting the areas nicely. I'm then going to coat this generously in a lovely violet red, which is actually pinkle, and this is going to be the base of the skin tones. In order to push the contrast a little bit more, I'm going to use a baby pink just to add a little bit more highlights, and not before coming back in with a transparent red into all the shadows and pushing the shadows as far as I can possibly do it. Now I'm going to mix up some medium flesh tone, relatively thin, probably 50-50 in my airbrush with water, and I'm going to spray this over the top of the model. This time I'm going to try to leave a fair amount of that purple underneath the skin. Then I'm going to take basic skin tone and again highlight all the brightest areas of the same volumes that I had done previously. Now with the orcish flesh a little bit more watered down than before, I'm going to spray this into all the underside shadows and mostly cover up that purple, but don't cover it completely because that will then ruin the look of the skin tones. And then obviously I paint eyeballs on this lady because it looks kind of weird if I don't, and that's how her skin tones came out. I hope that this video helps you in some way. Genuinely, that is the only reason that I make YouTube videos, because I wanted to be able to help people to be able to paint a little bit easier. Maybe just ease that burden of fear before you start painting. Or maybe it was just a great time while you were on the toilet. I would like to thank my Patreons right now for their help in blinding my eyeballs and keeping the support going over on the Patreon. If you want to support the channel, you can support just by liking this video, leaving some comments, sharing it with your gran, or you can look into my Patreon. If you didn't like anything you saw in this video, then I don't actually care. And now is a good time for you to kindly f*** off.